So this is a 1964, so pretty early, Deluxe Reverb. And I have some blue tape here because this was worked on by a very well-respected tech in the past, but I don't know how far back or what of the work that was done inside is his. And I've seen some things that I'm going to be calling attention to as needing to be done. And just to avoid any possible controversy or internet shit show, I'm just not going to have his name featured there. And I'm going to assume that he did fantastic work, and what I find in here that doesn't match up with someone else's. Now, the first thing I see, besides that, is that there was at some point another hole drilled here in the chassis, Fender Electric Instrument Company, right through that very valuable bit of print, but it has been plugged with a 3/8" plastic plug, and that's fine. The second thing I see is that these JJs are not original to this amp, or were in some other amp first. At least this one was, and since the matching and transconductance numbers match on them, I'm going to assume that both of them were in some other amp, because this one has a telltale marks that it was in an amp which had bear trap retainers, and this amp does not have any. So the tears in the label here from the old retainer, that was when this amp, these particular tubes were in some other amp. That, and I don't know how well it's going to come across in the video, but this tube, this 6V6S, has very bright red lettering, and this one is all faded and darkened. This tube has been running very hot in its life. This one has not. So this tube may be totally bad. This one's been hogging all the current, or this one may be having just drawing a ton of current. Either way, I can tell we're probably going to need to get a new pair of 6V6s. The output transformer and choke are from 1963. The power transformer and reverb driver transformer are from 1964. And someone has previously put in the 16 microfarad 475 volt FNTs, which are a good choice, and they seem to have been done well. I'm just going to measure these two resistors, make sure they still measure 10K. 14K. And just under 11K, so 10.9. So this one's drifted by 10%. This one has drifted a good, 40%. So I'm going to put two new 2-watt 10Ks in there while I have the amp in. I'll leave these FNTs in unless they show sign of, there's no date code on the FNTs, and there's no date code as to when this was done. But they seem fine. Unless I hear a problem, I'm going to assume they're okay. While I've got the amp up like this, I'm going to make sure all the screws for the transformers are tight. They often are not. Reverb's good. Got some yellow oxide buildup on the output, but the screws are nice and tight. Let's check the choke. That's all good. And that one was a little bit loose, but now it's tight. I'll do the power transformer connections from the other side. Looking at everything inside, I can see that they have the fuse on the neutral and the hottest switch, so that's never been changed to be correct. They still have the death cap. I'm not a fan of that. That'll go away. Still has the original screen grids. Sometimes that's okay. These often drift, especially when you have a tube which has been drawing a lot of current. I'll check those as well as the grid stoppers, 1.5Ks down there. It's had a changed out second auxiliary speaker jack there. Maybe in the past someone put a mid spot or a master volume there, but it has been, switchcraft has been put back. Let's see. The ground is being made to the transformer mounting hardware, and the ground is shorter than the hot and neutral, or about the same length. I guess it's technically a little bit longer, but it's under some stress. That ground connection is a little bit tight for my tastes. Let's see, anything else in this area? Has one little mystery bit of solder here that's was attached to something, but is no longer attached. And that's not a point where many things were ever soldered from the factory in 1964. But who knows? All right, the bias cap has been changed out with an MOD. Still has the original bias resistor and original diode. That's not my preference. I find at this point that many of the diodes used in the 60s have begun to fail, and they're so inexpensive. The bias resistor rarely fails, but I'll often change it while I'm in there. It measures 491 ohms, 492 ohms, 491.9 for those who really care. So it's a little bit high from the 470, but probably still fine. But the diodes and the bias supply often begin to fail. Let's see if it has. I doubt it, since the amp was working for the owner. But sometimes you get nasty, nasty surprises. All right, 0.5 volt that way. And nothing. So it has not failed yet. But as the proper diode is about 4 cents, and it's such a critical thing in an amp like this, I'll often change it out just to get the next 60 years worth out of it. Measuring the screen grids, 496, 489. Those probably can stay. They don't get as hot on the 6V6 typically as they do on the 6L6. But sometimes they're toasted. This grid stopper is 1.5K. Has not drifted. It's kind of amazing. This one's 1.6K. Not perfectly matched. Doesn't really matter in this case. It's not going to be a factor. I do see that the connections for the the grid stoppers on pin 5 are a little bit solder starved. So while I'm in that area, I'll just make sure that they have really strong connections. And let's make sure that the 3 nuts on the power transformer that I can tighten right now, the ones that don't have a ground lug on them, are in fact tight. Let's see. Here we go. That one's tight. That one's tight. One with the ground lug wasn't all the way tight, but it wasn't what I would really call loose. And that one's tight. So I could leave this, but I'm going to do this to chassis. This ground, the safety ground is chassis. And the power cable that's on here is really short. It's like 4.5 feet. So I'm going to give them an 8 or 9 foot cable. Let's see. I'll go ahead and point out the big bad thing that I see in this amp, and then we'll talk about the little things. Right here, there's a big glob of solder where this wire is supposed to be attached to this brass control strip. This is the wire which grounds the entire phase inverter in the negative feedback section. This is going to chassis right here at this brass control panel, control strip. But that blob of solder looks terrible. Doesn't look reliable. Looks like it's been added to over the years, but never really gotten right. More worryingly, this one here has broken out. I could just pull this right out of here if I wanted to. I'm going to clean that, resolder that, and it'll look pretty much factory when I'm done, though, you know, clean and shiny. But this is the cathode for the reverb stage, the reverb driver and mixer and all that fun stuff. And it's going to just be a very unreliable ground until that's redone. The tremolo bypass cap has been changed out for an MOD. These two have been changed out for kind of generics. And then these are still original. So I doubt that these are any good. This one's got a little bubble on it. Even if it's not bubbling, they're, 60-something years old at this point, 60 years old. It is time. They have a lifespan of 15 to 20 years. And lifespan does not mean that at the end of that they blow up. It's that they're not working well at this point. If I were to measure them, they'd probably be all over the map. And it's best just to go ahead and get these cleaned up and replaced. When I do a full filter cap job in one of these, like the filter caps on the other side in the doghouse, I change all these at the same time. That's just my preference. It's possible that the previous good tech who worked on this only did the little deticking solution here in the tremolo where this cap is added across the roach. And this MOD cap was installed, which would make the tremolo have the right strength. So it's possible that since that's an MOD and that's an MOD, that's what the good tech did and probably did the F&Ts. And maybe there wasn't the budget then to get everything right. I can't imagine that the tech whose name I'm not mentioning missed these. These are big deals. So I assume that this happened after he had the amp. Or maybe the previous client was one of those guys like, no, it hasn't failed. If it's original, keep it. It's original, keep it. In which case you end up with a whole bunch of old toilet paper tubes in your amp that don't do any damn good for you. But, other than the 7 bypass caps, A couple of grounds I need to touch up. The power wiring being redone with a new longer power cable. The work that was done in the amp overall is pretty damn good. The amp's in really good shape. New pair of 6v6s, bias it up. This thing should sound fantastic. Fingers crossed, that's all there is. You never quite know until you turn it on, but that's the stuff I can see from here. Until the next one, thanks for watching.